Resident Evil Village is the 8th installment in the main line of Resident Evil games, excluding spin-offs. Hurts to say that Code Veronica is a spin-off. The game was potentially the most hyped game of the year, and one that mostly lived up to the expectations, which is a rare thing these days. Village has been out now since May of this year, and like a sharp sword has split the fandom down the middle, evoking conflicting emotions amongst its members. While a lot of people praised it for its exciting gameplay and atmosphere, an equal amount of people saw the flaws in the story and believed it was not as scary as it could have been. I fall somewhere between the two of these groups, as although overall I did enjoy the game immensely, what with the exploration, puzzles, characters and sandbox design, I personally like my Resident Evil games to be a little more scary, and although at times the game did achieve that, it was never for too long, and instead of feeling like its fantastic predecessor at some parts in the game, it felt like the loathed Resident Evil 6. I didn't hate the game, but it just left me wanting more, which I guess is better than being bored with a dragged out game. Everyone was expecting to see some DLC attached to the game, and we now know that there will be DLC thanks to confirmation by Capcom themselves. This was announced a while back now, and many people have noticed that the DLC for Biohazard came out pretty quickly, with some of them releasing a month or two after the game came out. Biohazard was arguably very generous with the amount of extra content it made available for the player, ranging from full-on story expansions to minigames and scenarios. There were plenty of extra goodies for the fans, on top of an already complete Resident Evil experience. However, with Village, I feel that the addition of DLC is much more needed, as the experience is not as fulfilling as Biohazard, and there are plenty of aspects of the game that need flushing out more. The game could really benefit from some DLC, shedding light on some of these more obscure pieces of the lore. Everybody has their own desires and wishes on what they want to see in terms of additional content for Village, as do I, which is why I will be talking about what I want to see personally. This is going to be within reason, of course, as although a dream DLC for me would obviously be Chris and Leon teaming up to fight monsters, I highly doubt this will happen in the game, so I will be talking about potential DLC that could actually happen in Village. Goes without saying that this doesn't mean any of this will happen, but you know, I can dream. Despite its mixed reception from fans, there is no arguing that Village did leave an impression on the people who played it, and also strangely, the people who had never played a Resident Evil game before in their lives. I'm pretty sure we all remember those dark couple of months where Lady Dimitrescu broke the internet and was all over our feeds, showing off her great big personality to the world. Mummy Vampire was not the only big bad in Village to spread across the internet like wildfire, as there was another who she just narrowly beat. Daddy Heisenberg. For me, Heisenberg was the most complex and interesting antagonist out of the 5 you encounter on Ethan's journey to save Rose. His threatening yet charming demeanour really made him stand out compared to the other villains of the franchise, whilst a lot of the villains were just flat out evil, wanting nothing more than world domination or self-gain. Heisenberg seemed to be a reasonable person when confronted by Ethan. You know, just before he turned into a Transformer.
Autobots, transform and roll out!
Despite technically being a side villain, acting as a henchman for Mother Miranda, Heisenberg stole the show with his unique voice, cool design, and sense of humour.
Lady, supersized bitch. Ugly ass psycho doll. An embryonic freak.
Despite the love this scruffy-looking Van Helsing gets, his boss fight was very over the top and felt really out of place in the game, so a great DLC about the character would be a fantastic send-off to him and satisfy his Stan army once and for all. His backstory would be great to explore further, how he got his powers, and why he isn't as faithful to Mother Miranda as the others. I know some notes are found within the game that provide clues for these questions, and yes, there is some dialogue with Heisenberg where he reveals some secrets to you, but it would be so much better to actually play through these events, maybe acting similar to the Sisters DLC from Resident Evil 7, which of course gave us the origins of the Baker family and how they became infected by Evelyn. As well as additions to the lore, the DLC could offer up some new gameplay by allowing the player to use Heisenberg's powers, letting them manipulate the environment around them. This DLC idea is one that I hold hope for, but I feel like an add-on about Lady Big Tit Dimitrescu is more likely to happen, because Capcom knows how to make their money from thirsty people on the internet. One major problem I have with Village is that some characters were favoured greatly over others, leaving some void of character and relevance in the story. Two of the worst offenders for a lack of personality and screen time are Mordu and Angie, two cool concepts that needed more appreciation from the devs, as Angie's segment for me was the most scary part of the game, feeling like something straight out of a Silent Hill game. It's a must for Village to have a DLC that gives the player a horror-focused experience, and this idea fits perfectly into that style of gameplay. Another character I feel was heavily underused is Elena. The way she was introduced and how she and Ethan interact. It seemed as though she would potentially become a companion to Ethan, resembling a character similar to Louise from Resident Evil 4, or even Carlos from Resident Evil 3. This was cut short, however, when Elena fell to her death after trying to escape a burning building with Ethan. It was a shame to see her death come so quickly into the story, but the game justifies it by using her death as motivation for Ethan to make sure he loses no one else in the village. Innocent people, of course, not werewolves, they're fair game. Despite the game portraying her as dead, and her clearly falling into the fire, something about it just feels wrong, and I don't feel like she is dead. I think a DLC focused on her could really bring justice to her character, and could also be used as a way to create a more horror-centered style of gameplay. I was a huge fan of the Maiden teaser. Tense atmosphere was great for the setting, and I would love another crack at that style of gameplay. Not only would this be a refreshing change from the action with Ethan and Chris, it would make sense in terms of Elena's character. In Village, she is presented as a much more vulnerable and hesitant person than Ethan, which is shown by her tender nature, like when she tries to speak to her father, even though he's infected and is trying to kill her. Ethan also has the luxury of weapons and detachable limbs, so it makes more sense for Elena's DLC to be a lot scarier than the main game. Her DLC could pick up from the last place we saw her. She wakes up after falling from the roof, scrambling to find a way out of the burning building. This gives the devs an opportunity to reveal new locations and environments, like maybe sewers under the village and other cave systems, which Elena traverses through to escape the village for good, all the while hiding from enemies and solving puzzles. Having a horror-themed DLC is crucial, I feel, as the main game was sorely lacking in the horror department. The overuse of the werewolves took all the tension away from their initial appearance. With Elena's DLC, it could introduce, perhaps, an invincible enemy that stalks you around the sandbox, similar to other enemies in Resident Evil's history. However, take it that one step further by having that enemy be the only thing that chases you, but you constantly have to hide from it, never feeling safe. This would make for arguably one of the scariest experiences in an RE game. If something like this isn't added, then Capcom will have missed a massive opportunity. It would be an understatement to say that Resident Evil 7 was not innovative. The game saved the RE franchise from the clutches of death, reinventing itself with a first-person perspective and focusing more on horror once again, rather than action. As well as these new features and characters, the game raised several new questions. Who are Blue Umbrella? Are they related to the regular Umbrella? And if so, why the hell is Chris working with them? The man who probably hates Umbrella the most, after one of their spies got most of his friends killed. Plus, wasn't Chris working with the BSAA? While at first Blue Umbrella's intentions were not made clear, as many speculated rather than eradicate bioweapons, they were instead going to use them, which was further theorised when trailers for Village portrayed Chris as an antagonist, implying Blue Umbrella really were the bad guys. However, that was not the case, thankfully, and we can all rest easy that Chris would never let us down. A twist that did catch me off guard, however, was the fact that the BSAA were now in the market for bioweapons. This came as quite a shock, as people who have played RE5 and 6 know that the BSAA play a huge role in those games, acting as the forces of good, trying to contain and destroy bioweapons. So why all of a sudden has an Uno reverse card being played, and they now contradict their past beliefs? We were good, but now we're bad. The ending of Village sets up a plot where Chris goes to Europe to deal with the BSAA, hinting potentially at the events of a sequel or a DLC. I feel like a DLC showcasing the BSAA's initial transition from good to bad would make for a very interesting story, and it could give players another opportunity to play as Chris again, with action-oriented gameplay. Acting as a prequel, it could follow Chris on another routine mission with the BSAA, hunting down and eliminating and another BOW. However, before Chris can kill the monster, he is stopped and the creature is carted off back to the BSAA HQ for study. Puzzled, you then play as Chris inside BSAA HQ, perhaps in a secret part of the facility where you finally uncover the truth of the organisation's corruption. Angered by this betrayal, Chris plans to leave, however is captured and is forced to fight for his life as he is put to death by the hands of more grotesque mutations. He of course survives the conflict and escapes the facility, but not before setting the place to self-destruct, rounding up any other members who wish to defect. Maybe this could give us an opportunity to see a cameo from Sheva or Joshua from Resident Evil 5. I feel this will be a great prequel story to tell that would help bridge the last time we saw Chris in RE6 to when we meet him in RE7. Village was clearly a love letter to old-fashioned horror stories and folklore. Classic monsters like werewolves and vampires helped bring the vision to life, and it was a very interesting change from the typical zombies and other infected creatures encountered throughout the past games. Village went for a more paranormal approach, with most of the characters feeling like mysterious ghostly entities. One such character falling under this category being Duke. Duke is a very mysterious character when you meet him, offering his wares to Ethan, filling in for an old friend from RE4, whilst appearing all over the map in bizarre locations, such as when you find him in the Dimitrescu castle, or when you find him in Heisenberg's lair. Given his, stature, it's puzzling to see how he could possibly get around so fast, leading many to believe that he is perhaps a spirit of some sort.
Speaking of foolish questions, who or what are you?
Even I can't quite answer that.
His intentions are left unclear for most of the game, as although he offers advice to Ethan, helping you progress through the game, you can't tell if maybe he's just doing it to lure Ethan into a trap. Thankfully, the Duke is a sound bloke, even going as far as to take Ethan in his carriage to face off against Mother Miranda for the last time. At the end of the game, the Duke had become one of my favourite characters, and I wanted to know so much more about this mysterious shopkeeper. That's why I think a DLC exploring more about the Duke would be loved a lot by fans. With a DLC like this, I think it would be cool to follow the relationship Duke has with the antagonists of Village. Considering he knows so much about the members of Mother Miranda's family, seeing Duke interact with them would be interesting. In terms of who you play as in the DLC, I think it would make more sense to play as another villager rather than Duke himself, given the fact that he is pretty much immobile for a lot of the time. There would definitely have to be a third party involved, so maybe add a new character, like how Clancy from Resident Evil 7 was used in some of the DLC. It would be great to have a little bit of insight into how Duke works, and maybe it could give us a cameo from an old friend. Obviously, none of these ideas are confirmed, these are just ideas thrown together by me that I would personally love to play and experience. However, I do think we will get an anthology story about at least one of the characters in Village. Heisenberg would be my number one choice, but my money is on Dimitrescu, considering her story and arc in the game was arguably a little bit disappointing considering how she was marketed. So this would be a great way to give her character some closure, and maybe Capcom could release some body pillows of her.